Now we're going to add other statements. So we would like to be able to click on the Apple div and have the position of the div change, and also so we want this position to be random. Okay, so first of all we need to set the CSS property of Apple, which is position. We need to set it to absolute. Okay, and then we're gonna define the top and left properties. All right, so let's go for that. So first of all, we're changing the position to absolute. So we're gonna access. So let's just copy this. So you're gonna access the Apple div using its ID, and then we're gonna use the CSS function. All right, and we're gonna, so we're looking here at the position property, and we're setting that to absolute. We need this before we use the top and left values. Okay, so the next thing is going to be to use the CSS method, and this time, okay, so you're going to have a few values to change. So we're going to use curly brackets. So the first one is going to be top, and this time is going to be colon. Okay, let's just try for now. Let's try something rather than going for a random number. For now, let's just go for a defined number, 20 or 30, and we need to use a comma comma before setting the next property, and let's set left to 30 as well. Okay, so let's see what happens. So if you click on the Apple div, so we can see that first of all the position property has been set to absolute, and also top to 30 and left to 30. Okay, so now rather than 30, we would like to use a random number between 0 and 200, for example. Okay, so can you try this yourself? So we know that we're going to be using the math method random. Okay, and we know random is going to give us something between 0 and 1. So we're looking here at something between 0 and 200. So all we're going to do is to multiply that by 200 exactly. So let's do that. So it's going to be 200 multiplied by math random. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing for the other value, and this time if we click on Apple, okay, so the position now top and left, okay, is going to be something between 0 and 200. All right, so we're going to try something else. So at the same time the position changes, we want to change also the background color of Apple. So we're going to do that using the background color property. Okay, so as we have done for top and left, we're going to do exactly the same thing here with the background color. So rather than top, we're going to have background color. Okay, and the value. So first of all, just to make it simple, let's use a defined value using the RGB function. Okay, so it needs to be between quotes, and I'm going to go for RGB. So let's use some values there: 100, 100, 100. Okay, and let's make sure that this is working before we go for some random colors. So this is working fine. So now rather than having these defined values, so you want a random value between 0 and 256. Okay, so rather than 100, we're going to have between 0 and 256. But before we do that, let's just break this string. So we're going to break it using the following method. So first, we're going to just set that to, So we're going to be cutting this chunk of the string and then adding the number, and then adding this part, then adding another number. Let's just add some space there to make it more readable, and then same thing, and then we add a number, and that's it. Okay, so all we're going to do, so first let's make sure that this is working before we move to complicated functions. So it is still working. So now we're going to replace 100 by a value, a random value between 0 and 256. So we're going to use exactly the same function we used there, okay, but we're going to be using 256 multiplied by that. Okay, so let's try now. The RGB function needs round numbers. So these numbers are not round numbers. So basically, to get round numbers, we just going to need the math.floor method to get round numbers. Okay, so let's just copy this and replace it by math.floor. Okay, and here we go. I'm just going to put that inside the method, and let's just copy this and replace all these ones. And now it's supposed to be working. Yes, it is working. So when we click on the Apple div, so both the position and the background color are taking random values. All right, perfect. Okay. Now we're going to move to the Microsoft div, and we'd like to create a button. And when we click on the button, we want the Microsoft div to remove the green box class. And if we click again, we want the Microsoft div to get the green box class again. So for this, we're going to use another method. It's called toggle class. All right. So let's try this. First, let's create a button. So this time is going to be change Microsoft. Okay, and okay, so first we're going to access the button using the ID of the button, change Microsoft. Need the number sign there. Okay, and then the event is click. All right, and can have a function there. All right, okay. So in our statements, we're gonna access the Microsoft div using its ID, Microsoft. Let's make sure we don't forget the number sign, and then we're going to use the toggle class method. Okay, and we need to give it a class as a parameter. Okay, it's going to be green box. Okay, so let's try this. So if we click on the button, now we can see that the Microsoft div is either getting the green box class or the class is deleted. Okay, so we want to hide the Microsoft's div when we double click on it. So it's going to be easy. So we're going to access the Microsoft div. Okay, and event is double click in our case, and what we're going to do, so we're going to have a function that will just access the same div, which is Microsoft. So rather than accessing Microsoft again, we can just use this, okay? And the method we're going to use here is hide. All right, and now let's try it and make sure it is working. Yes, it is working. So let's try something else. Let's add another button. And basically, when we click on that button, so rather than hiding Microsoft, we would like to show it. Okay, just before we do that, hiding, or the function hide, is exactly similar to using the CSS method, changing the property of display to none. Okay, it's exactly the same thing. Okay, first of all, let's create the button, and let's call it, let's give it an ID, show Microsoft. Okay, and let's just copy this code. So we're accessing the button show Microsoft, and the event is clicking on the button, and once we click on the button, we want to access the Microsoft div using its ID, and the function is going to be show. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so let's double click on Microsoft to hide it, and now if we click on the button show Microsoft, it's going to show it again. All right, so one last thing before we finish. So we're gonna see how to wrap an element using tags. Okay, so let's say we would like to wrap the span great between divs. So first, let's just create another button, and this time, let's say change great. Okay, and let's put some text, change great. Okay, so let's copy this code. So we're accessing the button change great, and the event is still click, and once we click on the button, we are accessing the element with ID great. So let's just make sure that the span has got an ID. No, it doesn't have an ID. So let's give it an ID great. Okay, and basically the method we need to use here is called wrap. Okay, so as we want to wrap it between divs, all we need to do is write inside the quotes an open tag of div and a close tag of div. Okay, so let's see what happens. So we click on the button, and now we can see that the span elements has been wrapped between the div tags. So this element now is a div. Okay, so we just see here the dots at the end. We can just avoid that by putting the dots inside this span, and let's try again, and we can see that it's working. Okay, so we have seen in this video how to change HTML styling using jQuery. We covered a few methods, including changing dimensions of divs, swapping between classes, adding classes, removing classes, showing and hiding elements, and so on.